Alien girl laughed at Earth until she got pregnant by a human man. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Zila had always thought Earth was primitive, a backward little planet stuck on the edge of the Milky Way. Its chaotic cities, polluted skies, and obsession with money and power seemed foolish to her. From the comfort of her ship's observatory, the bustling human activity below was a constant source of amusement. It was her own private show, filled with comical behavior and absurd rituals. But Zila wasn't on Earth to be entertained. She was on a diplomatic assignment, representing the Tirati, a highly advanced alien civilization known for their powerful telepathy, long lifespans, and mastery of genetic engineering. The mission's purpose was to observe the humans and determine if they were worth including in the Galactic Federation. Personally, she thought the answer was clear. They were not. She rolled her crystalline blue eyes as she watched a crowd gather for a celebrity's autograph in one of the cities below. Humans seemed so easily distracted, so obsessed with trivial matters. Zila's people had evolved beyond such nonsense millennia ago. What could this species possibly offer to the Federation? A flicker of movement on the monitor drew her attention to a nearby research facility nestled within a forest. It was the site of one of Earth's most ambitious projects, studying cosmic phenomena to advance their understanding of space travel. The humans were ambitious, she had to admit. If they ever did manage to join the galactic community, perhaps they'd make interesting partners. Though, the thought of that happening seemed laughable. It wasn't long before she noticed one human in particular. He was tall and had unruly dark hair, always squinting at his holographic screens or pacing back and forth with a frustrated expression. His name was Ethan Westbrook, a theoretical physicist leading a team studying gravitational anomalies. His passion for his work caught her attention, even though she initially dismissed him as just another human chasing elusive ideas. Yet, she found herself watching him more often than the others, curious about his dedication. One evening, as the facility's lights began to dim and the human scientists trickled away, Ethan lingered behind. Zila's scanners picked up a faint energy surge around his workstation, an anomaly that piqued her scientific curiosity. She leaned closer to the monitor, intrigued by the faint distortion forming around the laboratory. Suddenly, an alert flashed on her console. The anomaly's energy signature was growing unstable, expanding beyond the lab. Whatever the humans were experimenting with was on the verge of spiraling out of control, and no one seemed to notice, except Ethan, who was frantically inputting commands into his equipment. "This is why they're not ready," she muttered to herself, opening a channel to the station's communication network. She tapped into their frequency and spoke in a language that humans wouldn't recognize but could understand, thanks to her ship's translator. "Human scientist," she said, her voice resonating in Ethan's earpiece. "The energy field you've generated is reaching critical levels. Cease your experiment immediately." Ethan jolted upright, his eyes darting around the empty lab. Who's there?" he stammered, glancing at the security cameras, as if trying to spot a hidden speaker. Zila sighed, realizing he wouldn't see her. "You need to deactivate the field stabilizers," she continued. "It's about to breach containment." "What are you talking about?" Ethan demanded, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Who are you?" "A friend," she replied curtly. "If you want to survive the next few minutes, do as I say." Ethan hesitated only for a moment before rushing to the control panel, his hands moving over the switches and dials as he followed her instructions. Within moments, the energy levels began to stabilize, and the field started to collapse safely. The anomaly dissipated, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air where it had been. Breathing a sigh of relief, Ethan slumped against the panel, his eyes still wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. "I don't know who you are or what you are," he said aloud, "but thank you. You just saved this place from becoming a crater." "It was nothing," Zila replied dryly. "Though I am curious what possessed you to tamper with forces you barely understand." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What's it to you? Are you some kind of extraterrestrial watchdog?" Zila laughed, a soft, melodic sound that seemed to carry through the room. "Something like that," she answered. "Let's just say I was in the right place at the right time." For the first time, Ethan noticed a faint shimmering outline near the corner of the lab, where the air seemed to ripple unnaturally. He squinted at it, trying to make sense of the odd sight, but the shape quickly faded away, leaving him wondering if it had been a trick of the light. "I don't suppose you'd care to show yourself?" he asked, half expecting silence in return. To his surprise, Zila considered it. Her superiors wouldn't approve of direct contact, but her curiosity was piqued by this human. He wasn't like the others. His intellect, though limited by human standards, had a raw persistence that intrigued her. She deactivated her ship's cloaking field and descended, appearing in the lab with a shimmering glow. Ethan's jaw dropped when he saw her. A striking woman with azure skin, bright crystalline eyes, and shimmering silver hair. Her form was both familiar and alien, her features sharply elegant, and her gaze piercing as it locked onto his. "Hello, human," she said, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "I'm Zila of the Tirati. Consider this a very rare opportunity." He was too stunned to reply immediately, his mind racing with questions. Why would an alien be interested in helping him? And what exactly did she want? As the initial shock wore off, he managed to say, "I've never been rescued by an alien before. Do you, make a habit of this?" "Only when humans are foolish enough to threaten their own existence," she retorted with a playful gleam in her eye. Ethan couldn't help but chuckle. "Well then, I guess I'm lucky you were watching." Zila's smirk softened into a smile. "Perhaps," she said, "or perhaps it's you who have intrigued me, Mr. Westbrook. It's not every day a human draws the attention of a Tirati." And with that, a peculiar bond began to form between them, one that neither fully understood, but would soon grow deeper than either could have anticipated. Zila didn't intend to revisit the human facility, but her curiosity kept pulling her back. She told herself it was merely to observe how the human scientist reacted to their encounter, to see if his near disaster would deter his reckless pursuits. But as the days passed, she found herself monitoring him more closely, catching snippets of his conversations, even watching as he worked late into the night. There was something about Ethan's tenacity, his refusal to give up on solving the mysteries of the universe, that fascinated her. Meanwhile, Ethan couldn't shake the encounter either. The mysterious woman with azure skin and crystalline eyes haunted his thoughts, her voice echoing in his mind. It felt surreal, like something out of a sci-fi novel, yet he couldn't deny what he had seen. He wasn't sure why he hadn't reported the incident, maybe because some part of him wanted to keep it to himself, or maybe because he knew no one would believe him. On the fourth night after their first encounter, as the lab's dim lights glowed and the rest of the staff had gone home, Ethan stayed behind. He wasn't sure what he expected to happen, if anything, but he couldn't let go of the hope that she might return. He stared at his holographic monitor, struggling to concentrate on his calculations. His fingers tapped absently on the keyboard, his thoughts elsewhere. "Still tinkering with forces you barely understand, I see," a familiar voice said, drifting through the quiet lab. Ethan spun around, his eyes widening as Zila emerged from a shimmering distortion at the corner of the room. She looked just as he remembered, her gaze as piercing as ever. "You're back," he said, his tone somewhere between surprise and relief. "I thought I might have imagined you." "Humans often doubt what they don't understand," she replied, gliding closer to him. "But I assure you I am very real, and so are the dangers you're playing with." He folded his arms across his chest. "You keep saying that. If you're so concerned, why don't you explain it to me? Maybe then I'll understand why you're watching me." Zila hesitated. The Tirati didn't typically share their knowledge with species they deemed inferior, especially one like humanity that was still centuries behind in technological advancement. But there was something about the way Ethan looked at her, his eyes full of a mixture of determination and curiosity, that made her want to break the rules, if only for a moment. "Your experiments with gravitational fields are dangerous because you lack the technology to properly contain them," she said finally. "You're tampering with space-time itself, creating tiny rifts that could tear open if they're not controlled properly. If that happens," she let her words trail off, the implication clear. Ethan's brow furrowed. "Then why help me? Why not just let me fail and learn from my mistakes?" "Because your mistakes would cost many lives," she replied sharply. "I'm not here to guide you. I'm here to prevent catastrophe. The real question is, Why do you persist? You must know your odds of success are slim. His gaze didn't waver. Maybe it's because I refuse to accept limitations, he said. If humanity is ever going to explore the stars, we need to push boundaries. I know the risks, but progress doesn't come without them. Zila's expression softened, a flicker of something almost like respect crossing her features. You're more stubborn than I thought, she said, her tone almost amused. But if you're determined to keep going, you'll need help. And I don't mean just advice from an alien watchdog. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Help? From you? She nodded slowly. You could use guidance. The Tirati have spent millennia perfecting our understanding of space-time manipulation. I could offer you insights, but I need something in return. What could I possibly offer you? Ethan asked, genuinely baffled. Perspective, Zila said, surprising even herself. I've spent much time observing your kind, but observation is not the same as understanding. You could show me how humans think, how you innovate and adapt in the face of adversity. There are things even the Tirati could learn from that. The proposition hung in the air, an unspoken promise of knowledge shared and gained. Ethan weighed the offer carefully. He wasn't sure if trusting her was a good idea, but he had to admit that a part of him was eager to learn from her. This could be the breakthrough he had been searching for, or it could be a colossal mistake. After a moment, he nodded. All right, he said, you help me understand the risks, and I'll help you understand humanity. A strange sensation tingled through Zila at his words, something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't quite excitement, but a feeling of anticipation that bordered on it. She had watched humans before, of course, but never from this close. Never had she allowed herself to form any kind of connection with one. Then it settled, she said, extending her hand towards him. We'll begin with your latest data on gravitational anomalies. I can show you how to strengthen your containment fields. Ethan hesitated only briefly before taking her hand. Her skin was cool to the touch, almost metallic, and he felt a subtle pulse of energy radiating from her. All right then, let's get to work, he said, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. As they delved into the data, hours flew by unnoticed. Zila's knowledge was astonishing, her explanations a blend of concepts that Ethan struggled to grasp, but couldn't help but marvel at. She spoke of dimensional fluxes and quantum fabric as if they were mere curiosities, while he took frantic notes, his mind racing to keep up. Their collaboration continued night after night, each session drawing them closer together. Though Zila maintained a cool demeanor, Ethan began to notice small changes, an amused quirk of her lips when he made a joke, a softened gaze when he expressed his frustrations. And in turn, Zila found herself more intrigued by his stubbornness, his resilience, and the glimpses of vulnerability he showed when he spoke about his own hopes and fears for humanity. It was a gradual connection, unplanned and unspoken, but it grew stronger with each passing night. For the first time, Zila began to wonder if there was more to humanity than she had originally believed. And for Ethan, the line between curiosity and something deeper began to blur. Neither knew it yet, but their collaboration was setting them on a path that would change both of their worlds forever. Weeks passed, and what had started as a strange arrangement evolved into something neither Zila nor Ethan had anticipated. Late nights in the lab became their routine, with holographic screens casting soft glows over their focused faces as they delved into the mysteries of spacetime. Zila's insights proved invaluable, helping Ethan stabilize the gravitational fields with precision that eluded his peers. He had made more progress in those few weeks than he had in the past year, and it was all thanks to her. But beyond the technical advances, something else was happening. Conversations that began with equations and field theories started to drift into other topics, philosophy, art, and even their personal experiences. At first, Zila kept her responses measured, out of habit more than anything. But as the days went by, she found herself sharing more than she intended, caught up in the warmth of their exchanges. You know, Ethan said one night as he leaned back in his chair, when I was a kid, I used to lie out in the backyard and stare up at the stars, wondering if anyone was out there looking back. Funny to think that, somewhere out there, you could have been staring back at us. I was not, for the record, Zila replied, smirking. The Tirati don't typically concern themselves with primitive worlds. Earth only came onto our radar in the last few decades, when your space programs started showing promise. Even then, I wouldn't have given this planet much thought if it weren't for you. Her words caught Ethan off guard. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, a sensation that surprised him with its intensity. What is it about me that's different? He asked, genuinely curious. She regarded him with those crystalline blue eyes, as if assessing him. You are persistent, she said slowly. Your species as a whole, despite your technological limitations, have a unique drive to explore, to push beyond your limits. I don't know if it's ambition or stubbornness, but it's something we lost long ago. She paused, her gaze drifting toward the window where the night sky stretched endlessly. And it's something I find myself drawn to. Ethan felt a pang of something he hadn't expected. Sympathy for all her superiority. It almost seemed as if Zila envied the very thing she mocked. Well, he said softly, maybe it's not too late for you to find it again. She shot him a glance, her expression unreadable. And perhaps that's the very thing you humans can teach us, she murmured. How to see the universe with wonder again. Their discussions shifted back to work, but the moment lingered in the air like the faintest of breezes. As they delved deeper into the project, Ethan noticed something peculiar in the way Zila spoke about her own kind. She would refer to the Tirades' technological advancements and social structures with pride, but there was an undercurrent of dissatisfaction, as if she was repeating lessons memorized rather than lived experiences. Do you miss it? Ethan asked one night, unable to resist the question any longer. Miss what? She responded, not looking up from the energy graph she was analyzing. Your home, he clarified. The Tirade world. It sounds like you've been away from it for a long time. She hesitated, and for a moment, her normally composed expression faltered. It's complicated, she said. When you reach a certain age among my people, you are expected to leave behind things like sentimentality. You go where your duties take you. Home becomes just another place. That sounds lonely, Ethan said softly. Her gaze flicked to him, as if searching his face for something. We're not supposed to think that way, she replied, a trace of bitterness in her voice. Our emotional range is not as expansive as yours. We have our ways of finding contentment, but loneliness, she shook her head. It is not supposed to be part of the equation. But what if it is? He pressed, his voice gentle. What if you feel it anyway? Does that make you different from the others? Zila didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the monitor, her expression distant, as if trying to reconcile a question she'd never dared to ask herself. Perhaps, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Perhaps I am different. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions neither of them was quite ready to confront. For Ethan, there was a strange sense of connection that went beyond their scientific collaboration. He wasn't sure if it was friendship or something more, but it was undeniable. As for Zila, she found herself intrigued not just by Ethan's work ethic, but by his compassion, an emotion that Tirade viewed as a weakness, yet one that seemed to strengthen him. Their experiments continued to bear fruit, and soon, Ethan's work attracted attention from the facility's administrators. His colleagues began to notice the late nights and the unusual breakthroughs. Rumors swirled about his sudden genius, but none could explain the elusive consultant who seemed to appear and disappear without a trace. The pressure from above grew, with higher-ups demanding more details on his progress, which put Ethan in a difficult position. How could he explain his collaboration with an alien without jeopardizing Zila or himself? One evening, after another successful test, Zila noticed the tension in Ethan's expression as he shut down the equipment. What troubles you? She asked. He glanced at her, his brow furrowed. People are starting to ask questions, he admitted. They want to know how I've been making such fast progress. I've been deflecting for now, but they're getting suspicious. She crossed her arms, a thoughtful look on her face. Humans do have a tendency to grow paranoid when confronted with what they cannot explain, she said. But you must be careful. If your superiors learn the truth, it could bring unwanted attention. And not just to you. I know, he said, running a hand through his hair. I don't want to stop. We're so close to something incredible. But if they find out about you, Zila's eyes softened. We'll figure this out, she said, her voice steady. We have come too far to let it end now. I will not allow it. There was a resolve in her tone that comforted Ethan, even as it sparked a realization. She wasn't just an observer or a guide anymore. She was a partner in this, someone who was willing to take risks, even if it meant bending the rules of her own kind. And though neither of them would say it aloud, there was an unspoken promise between them. They would face whatever came next together. But as they resumed their work that night, neither Zila nor Ethan could shake the feeling that their bond was more than just professional. Something deeper was forming between them, something that defied logic, transcending their differences in a way that was as thrilling as it was dangerous. And as they stood on the brink of a discovery that could change everything, they were unaware that their growing connection would soon test them in ways they could never have imagined. Zila knew she was crossing a line, one that would have serious consequences if her superiors found out. The Tirati were strict when it came to diplomatic missions. Interaction with the humans was to be limited to observation and intervention only when absolutely necessary to prevent existential threats. Yet here she was, guiding a human scientist through complex theories that even some of her own kind struggled to understand. And it wasn't just the scientific collaboration. She could feel something inside her changing, a strange warmth that grew stronger every time she was around Ethan. It made her feel alive in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. It was unsettling and exhilarating all at once, a sensation that defied the emotional boundaries set by her people. Zila tried to dismiss it as curiosity, as a fascination with human resilience and creativity, but she wasn't sure if that was entirely true. Ethan, too, felt the growing tension between them. He had always been someone who prided himself on rationality and logic, but the lines were starting to blur. There was no denying the deepening connection he felt with Zila, and as much as he tried to focus on their work, his thoughts often wandered to her in unexpected ways. It wasn't just admiration for her intellect or even the strangeness of their partnership. It was something more, a longing that he didn't fully understand, but couldn't ignore. One night, as they reviewed data from their latest experiment, the atmosphere in the lab felt different. There was an energy in the air, a subtle pull that seemed to draw them closer with each passing minute. They stood side by side, examining the holographic display of their most recent breakthrough, a stable manipulation of a miniature gravitational field, which they had managed to sustain for several hours. It was an incredible achievement, one that could pave the way for revolutionary advances in space travel. But despite the excitement of the discovery, Ethan found his attention drifting to Zila. Her eyes glimmered with a light that seemed almost human, as she spoke animatedly about the implications of their work. Her passion was captivating, and he couldn't help but admire the way her usually composed demeanor softened when she let herself show excitement. "You know," he said quietly, "I don't think I could have done this without you." She glanced at him, a slight frown forming. "Humans tend to underestimate themselves," she replied. "You had the potential, but your methods needed refinement." "Maybe," he said, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "But it feels like you've done more than just refine my methods. You've changed the way I see everything." Zila tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "And how do you see things now, Ethan?" He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "I used to think that the only way to make a difference was through cold, hard science. Numbers, equations, facts. But you've shown me that there's more to discovery than just data. There's a..." He paused, searching for the right word. "A kind of magic in the unknown, something that makes the risk worth it." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the distance between them seemed to shrink to nothing. "Magic?" she echoed, her voice soft. "The Tirati do not believe in magic. We believe in the quantifiable." "Maybe that's what makes us different," he said. "Humans have always found wonder in what we can't explain. Or perhaps," she murmured, taking a step closer, "it's what makes us the same." The room felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken words. Ethan's pulse quickened as Zila's gaze held his. It was as though they had crossed an invisible threshold, one that neither of them had intended to approach. Yet here they were. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and brushed a strand of her shimmering silver hair away from her face. She stiffened at the touch, her eyes widening in surprise, but she didn't pull away. In that instant, a surge of emotion rushed through her, an unfamiliar sensation that she had only ever read about in human literature. It was irrational and dangerous, a spark that threatened to ignite something uncontrollable. But despite the warnings echoing in her mind, Zila found herself drawn to him, unable to resist the intensity of the moment. She began, but before she could finish, the lab's emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the room in a harsh red glow. A shrill alarm blared, shattering the fragile silence that had settled between them. Ethan immediately turned toward the console, his expression shifting from bewilderment to urgency. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered, tapping rapidly on the controls. "There's a containment breach in the secondary lab, an energy fluctuation." "Damn it, I thought we'd fix that." Zila's expression hardened as she swiftly scanned the data. "It's the gravitational field. It's destabilizing and spreading. We need to shut it down now, or it could rupture the space-time fabric." Ethan's hands flew over the controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm trying, but the system's not responding. The energy levels are spiking too fast. It's like something's amplifying it." Without hesitation, Zila activated a small device on her wrist, causing a faint shimmer to appear around her. "Step back," she commanded, her voice cool and steady. "I'm going to try a direct containment override." Before Ethan could respond, she extended her hand toward the flickering anomaly on the holographic display, her crystalline eyes glowing brighter as she focused her energy. A faint blue light emanated from her hand, wrapping around the fluctuating field in the secondary lab. The data on the screen showed a slow decrease in the energy levels as her containment field took hold. But it wasn't enough. The gravitational field resisted, pushing against her efforts, like a wild animal struggling to break free. A surge of power shot through the lab, causing the equipment to spark and shudder. Zila's expression tightened as she felt the strain, the energy pushing back against her containment field. She wasn't sure she could hold it. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed her free hand, his touch sending a jolt through her. "I'm not letting you do this alone," he said, his voice filled with a resolve that startled her. A strange sensation swept over Zila as his hand clasped hers. It wasn't just physical contact. It was as though their minds had briefly connected, a sudden merging of thoughts and emotions. For a split second, she felt everything he was experiencing, his fear, his determination, and something else she hadn't anticipated, a profound affection for her. The realization struck her like a bolt of lightning, nearly breaking her concentration. But somehow, she channeled that emotion into the containment field, using it as an anchor to stabilize the energy flow. Gradually, the gravitational field calmed, the anomaly fading back into a stable state. The emergency alarm ceased, and the room was once again bathed in the dim light of the lab. Zila exhaled shakily, releasing Ethan's hand and stepping back, her expression guarded. "That was reckless," she said, though her voice lacked its usual firmness. Ethan's chest heaved as he caught his breath. "We did it, didn't we?" "Yes," she replied, though she hardly heard herself. Her thoughts were racing, her emotions a tangled web. She wasn't supposed to feel this way, not about a human, but as she looked at him, still flushed from the adrenaline, she knew that something had changed between them. Something irrevocable. The incident had passed, but the true breach had occurred not in the lab, but in the space between their hearts. And now, as they stood there in the quiet aftermath, it was clear that they could no longer pretend their relationship was just professional. Neither could deny it any longer. What lay between them was forbidden, but it was real. And it was only the beginning. The emergency was contained, but the true aftermath began in the silence that followed. Zila could feel the weight of what had just happened, not only in the lab but in the moment of connection with Ethan. The emotions she had sensed when he grasped her hand were still coursing through her, and they were dangerous, too human, too intimate. She had broken a rule much older than herself, and the repercussions could extend far beyond this facility. Ethan, meanwhile, stood still, his gaze fixed on Zila, as if he were seeing her for the first time. In the grip of the crisis, they had shared something inexplicable, a fusion of purpose and emotion that felt deeper than he could put into words. He wasn't sure what it meant, only that he couldn't dismiss the feelings it had stirred in him. But the moment didn't last. Zila's expression grew cold, her composure slipping back into place as though a mask had been pulled over her face. She turned away and started gathering up the scattered data files, her movements abrupt and deliberate. "We should continue the analysis," she said, her voice clipped and formal. "We need to understand why the containment breach occurred and how to prevent it from happening again." Ethan frowned, recognizing her attempt to retreat behind a wall of professionalism. "Zila, about what happened back there. We should talk about it." "There is nothing to discuss," she replied quickly, her tone sharper than she intended. "It was a momentary lapse during a critical situation. It does not change anything." "It changes everything," he insisted, stepping closer to her. "Don't tell me you didn't feel something back there when we—" He struggled to find the right words. "When we connected." Zila's jaw tightened. She kept her gaze on the data files as she spoke, refusing to meet his eyes. "What you felt was an illusion," she said, "the result of heightened emotions during a dangerous situation. Do not mistake it for something more." "But it is more," Ethan said, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "I've been trying to ignore it, but I can't. Whatever this is between us, it's real." Her crystalline eyes finally met his, and he saw the conflict within them. "It is forbidden," she said softly. "A Tirati is not supposed to form attachments with humans. It is considered a weakness." "Maybe your people are wrong," he said, taking another step toward her. "Maybe they're missing out on something important." Zila shook her head, a bitter smile forming on her lips. "You do not understand. The Tirati are bound by a code that has existed for thousands of years. We evolved to suppress emotions that would interfere with our judgment. To break that code is not simply a matter of personal choice. It is a violation of our very nature." Ethan's voice softened. "Then why are you here, Zila? Why did you risk coming to Earth, interacting with me, and sharing things you're not supposed to? If you truly believed in your code, you wouldn't have let it get this far." Her expression faltered, and she looked away. "I came here to prevent your kind from making a catastrophic mistake," she said, but her tone lacked conviction. "But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of my purpose. Or maybe," Ethan countered, "you found a new purpose." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, Zila felt the pull of everything she had tried to suppress. It was as if a dam had cracked open, and all the emotions she had held back came rushing forward. The fascination she felt for Ethan's resilience, the warmth that blossomed whenever they spoke, and the undeniable attraction that had grown stronger with each passing day. But the fear was there, too, the fear that if she embraced these feelings, she would lose control of herself, of her mission, and of everything she was supposed to be. "I cannot," she whispered, her voice trembling with a vulnerability she hadn't shown before. "If my people find out, they will recall me. There would be consequences for both of us." "I don't care about the consequences," Ethan said, reaching out to touch her arm. "I care about you." The simplicity of his words struck her like a physical blow. She had read about human affection, how it was expressed in different ways, but she had never expected to experience it herself. The Tirati considered love to be a primitive emotion, one that had no place in their advanced society. Yet here it was, laid bare in the honest gaze of a human who had dared to see her not as an alien, but as someone worthy of care. Zila took a step back, her mind spinning. "This is too much," she said, her voice barely audible. "I need time to think." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked out of the lab, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to be alone, to find clarity amidst the chaos in her mind. She headed to a secluded area of the research facility's grounds, a small courtyard surrounded by tall trees, where the night sky was visible above. Staring up at the stars, Zila felt a pang of homesickness. She thought of her homeworld, its majestic crystalline cities, the serene light of its twin moons. For a moment, she wondered if her people were right. Perhaps she had let herself become too attached to this human, and it was clouding her judgment. But then she thought of Ethan's words, his compassion, and the way he had been willing to risk everything to save her during the containment breach. Was it truly weakness to feel something? Or was it strength to embrace the emotions that made life worth living? As she pondered these questions, she felt a presence approaching. She turned to see Ethan standing at the edge of the courtyard, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. "I didn't want to leave things like that," he said. "I know this is complicated for you. Hell, it's complicated for me too. But I'm not asking you to break your code or abandon your people. I'm just asking you to be honest with yourself. Zila looked at him, her heart aching with a longing she hadn't fully acknowledged until now. What would you have me do, Ethan? She asked, her voice raw. If I allow myself to feel this way, if I accept that what we share is real, what then? Then we figure it out together, he said, taking a step closer. I'm not saying it'll be easy. It might even be impossible, but I'd rather face the impossible with you than let you walk away from something that could change us both for the better. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for a moment, all her doubts seemed to fade away. She realized then that she had been denying herself something precious, something she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. It wasn't just curiosity or fascination, it was love, pure and terrifying. Slowly, Zila closed the distance between them, her hand reaching up to touch his cheek. If we do this, she said softly, there is no turning back. Ethan's hand covered hers, his touch gentle yet firm. I wouldn't want to. The kiss that followed was hesitant at first, as if they were both afraid of the consequences, but then it deepened, filled with the passion and longing that had been building for weeks. In that moment, everything else fell away, their differences, the risks, even the stars above them. All that remained was the undeniable connection between a human and an alien who had dared to defy the boundaries set by their worlds. As they broke apart, breathing heavily, Zila felt a strange calm settle over her. She didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time, she was willing to face it, no matter the cost. But even as they shared that tender moment, a quiet voice in the back of her mind warned that this was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, and not everyone would understand or accept their bond. For now, though, she allowed herself to savor the warmth of his embrace, knowing that they would face whatever came next together. The following weeks brought a sense of fragile normalcy to the lives of Ethan and Zila. Though beneath the surface, both knew that the storm was far from over. They continued their work at the research facility, focusing on stabilizing the gravitational field experiments. But now there was a new undercurrent, a deeper bond that colored every conversation, every glance. Their relationship had crossed the line, and there was no going back. Yet, Zila couldn't shake the feeling that they were living on borrowed time. Her people's code was clear, and if her superiors discovered the truth about her involvement with Ethan, the consequences would be severe. The Tirati were not known for leniency when it came to breaches of protocol. She kept telling herself she would eventually have to make a choice, but for now, she wanted to hold on to this fleeting happiness a little longer. Ethan, too, was aware of the risks. As much as he was enthralled by the burgeoning love he felt for Zila, he knew their situation was precarious. They were playing a dangerous game, not just with their emotions, but with the cutting-edge technology they were developing. Still, he pushed those worries aside each time he saw her smile, convincing himself that whatever came, they would face it together. It wasn't long before their secret was threatened. One evening, as Ethan was leaving the lab, he noticed a figure standing in the corridor, an unfamiliar man in a dark suit, with the kind of calm, authoritative air that marked him as someone important. His piercing gaze followed Ethan as he walked by, a small frown tugging at his lips. Ethan's stomach twisted. He recognized the man as Dr. Linhart, one of the senior officials who occasionally visited the facility. Linhart had always struck him as someone who asked too many questions and listened a little too carefully, and tonight was no exception. Mr. Connors, Dr. Linhart called out, his voice smooth but laced with an edge. May I have a word with you? Ethan stopped, turning to face the man with as much composure as he could muster. Of course, Dr. Linhart. What can I do for you? Linhart approached, his hands clasped behind his back. I understand you've been working closely with the alien advisor on the gravitational field experiments, he said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. That's right, Ethan replied, keeping his voice steady. Zila has been instrumental in helping us refine the technology. We've made significant progress thanks to her insights. Indeed, Linhart said with a thin smile. She's certainly proven invaluable. He took a step closer, his gaze never wavering. Tell me, Mr. Connors, have you noticed anything unusual about her behavior? Anything out of the ordinary? Ethan's heart raced. He didn't know what Linhart was fishing for, but his instincts told him to be cautious. No, he answered, shaking his head. She's very focused on the work, as always. Linhart mused, as if weighing Ethan's words. You see, I've noticed a pattern in her data submissions, slight deviations in her reports that suggest she may be conducting research outside of her assigned parameters. Of course, I could be mistaken, but I thought I'd ask someone who spends as much time with her as you do. Ethan forced himself to remain calm, though his thoughts were racing. If Linhart suspected Zila of anything, it could spell trouble for both of them. I wouldn't know, he said carefully. I'm not privy to all of her research protocols. Of course, Linhart said, his smile never reaching his eyes. Well, if you do notice anything unusual, I trust you'll bring it to my attention. Ethan nodded, his throat dry. Of course, sir. As he walked away, Ethan's mind buzzed with worry. He needed to warn Zila. They had been so careful to keep their relationship hidden, but if Linhart was sniffing around, it meant they were under scrutiny. When Ethan found Zila in their private lab, she was reviewing the latest results of the gravitational field experiments. Her usual calm expression softened slightly as she saw him enter, but it quickly turned to concern when she noticed the tension in his posture. What's wrong? She asked, setting down the datapad. We might have a problem, Ethan said, keeping his voice low. Linhart was just talking to me. He asked about you specifically if I'd noticed anything unusual. He mentioned deviations in your data reports. Zila's eyes darkened, and her jaw tightened. He's suspicious then, she said, more a statement than a question. The deviations were intentional. I've been masking certain information to protect our research. There are aspects of the gravitational field technology that could be exploited for military applications, and I was trying to keep it under wraps. Ethan's brows furrowed. You were hiding information? Zila, that's risky. Necessary, she corrected, her tone firm. I came to Earth with a primary goal of safeguarding your world from the misuse of advanced technology. There are factions within both the human and Tirati governments who would seek to weaponize this research. His eyes widened. So, you've been protecting us from ourselves this whole time? Not just from yourselves, she said quietly. There are others who would see Earth as a resource to exploit alien species who would not hesitate to use force to gain access to your technology. If they knew what we were working on, it could make this planet a target. Ethan took a step back, his mind reeling from the implications. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't supposed to get close to you, Zila admitted, her voice softening. I thought I could manage this mission without becoming involved. But then she stopped, her gaze meeting his. Things changed. A sense of dread crept into Ethan's chest. If Linhart finds out, or if your people do, I'll be recalled. Zila finished, a resigned look in her eyes. And you could face charges for conspiring with an alien agent. They would accuse you of knowing about the deviations and not reporting them. Ethan shook his head, a wave of frustration and fear surging through him. No, we're not going to let that happen. There has to be a way to keep this under wraps. We may not have much time, Zila said. Linhart's investigation could lead him to uncover the truth sooner than we think. Ethan's mind raced with possible solutions, none of which seemed promising. Then a reckless idea formed. What if we take the research and go public, he said. Expose the whole thing to the world. If we make the information about the technology and the risks known, it'll be harder for any one faction to control it. Zila's expression shifted to one of concern. That would put you and possibly even me at great risk. There are forces that will not hesitate to silence us if they perceive us as a threat to their agendas. I'd rather take that chance, Ethan said, his voice filled with resolve, than stand by and watch them destroy everything we've worked for. She reached out and took his hand, her touch grounding him. If we do this, she said quietly, there's no going back. We'd have to leave the facility, possibly go on the run. My people would see it as a betrayal. Ethan met her gaze, his heart pounding. You're not alone, Zila. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. For a moment, she just looked at him, a mixture of fear and gratitude in her eyes. Then she nodded. Very well, we'll need to act quickly. As they began to prepare, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something much bigger than they had anticipated. Secrets were being uncovered, and the walls that kept their worlds apart were starting to crumble. But he knew one thing for certain: they couldn't hide any longer. It was time to take control of their own destiny, even if it meant defying the laws of both human and alien worlds. Ethan and Zila worked through the night, preparing to take their research public. The plan was hastily put together, but driven by necessity. The longer they waited, the closer Linhart and his agents would get to discovering the truth. They would need to gather the data, encrypt it, and find a way to broadcast it to multiple channels simultaneously, ensuring the information would be impossible to suppress. But there was another obstacle. The research facility was under constant surveillance, and slipping away undetected would be no easy feat. As they packed what they needed, a palpable tension filled the air. Both knew this was their last night at the facility. No matter what happened next, they wouldn't be returning. "We'll need to divert the surveillance systems," Zila said, her tone all business. "I can create a false signal loop that will give us a window to get out, but it'll only buy us a few minutes." Ethan nodded. "Do it. I'll finish copying the last batch of data and prep the escape route." They moved with quiet urgency, each fully aware of the risks. Zila worked at a terminal, her fingers dancing over the controls as she accessed the facility's security network. Her heart raced. Bypassing the protocols wasn't difficult for her, but it would trigger an alert eventually. As she finalized the loop, she felt a momentary pang of guilt for betraying the trust of the people she had worked alongside. Yet, the knowledge of what could happen if the wrong hands got hold of their research kept her resolve strong. Ethan was just finishing securing the data when the lab door slid open, and Linhart stepped inside, flanked by 2 security officers. His expression was one of calculated suspicion, the kind that told Ethan he'd been caught. "Working late, Mr. Connors?" Linhart said, his gaze flicking over to Zila, who had already abandoned the terminal, her posture rigid with tension. "And, Miss Zila, I was hoping to speak with you about those data deviations." "Imagine my surprise to find the 2 of you here together." "Dr. Linhart," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady, "we were just wrapping up. Nothing out of the ordinary." "Indeed?" Linhart's eyes narrowed as he gestured to the security officers, who moved to block the exit. "You'll understand if I need to verify that. A few irregularities have come to my attention, and I would like to." Before he could finish, Zila moved. With a swift motion, she disabled the nearest security officer, using a Tirati nerve technique. The second officer reached for his stun baton, but Ethan was already swinging a lab stool at him, knocking the man off balance. Linhart backed away, his hand moving to an emergency comm on his wrist. "You're making a very dangerous mistake," he warned. "Stand down, both of you." Ethan's voice was tight with defiance. "Sorry, Linharci. We're not letting you take this research." Zila grabbed Ethan's arm. "We need to go now." With the diversion in place, they made a break for the emergency exit. Zila's false signal loop was still active, but it wouldn't hold much longer. Alarms began blaring as they raced down the corridors, their path illuminated by red emergency lights. As they neared the exit, Zila activated a small device that disrupted the facility's tracking signals. The night air hit them like a shock as they emerged outside. Ethan's heart pounded in his ears as they sprinted toward a small transport vehicle they had hidden in the surrounding forest. It was an unmarked hovercraft, a relic from earlier Earth technology, and it would get them out of the area fast enough to evade the pursuit that was surely closing in. The moment they climbed inside, Zila initiated the launch sequence, and the craft roared to life. As they lifted off, Ethan saw movement below, the security detail pouring out of the building, with Linhart at the forefront, shouting orders. The hovercraft shot forward, the landscape blurring as they sped away from the facility and into the wilderness. As they flew, Ethan glanced over at Zila. Her expression was steely, focused, but there was a hint of something else in her eyes, something like relief. He didn't let himself relax until they had put several kilometers between them and the facility. "Where do we go now?" he asked, his voice laced with a mixture of adrenaline and uncertainty. "There's a safe house," Zila replied. "I arranged it as a contingency. We can lie low there while we figure out our next move." The safe house was a remote, abandoned research outpost nestled in a dense forest on the outskirts of the city. It hadn't been used in years, but Zila had prepared it as a fallback location, equipping it with basic supplies and a communication array. They landed the hovercraft a distance away and approached the outpost on foot, making sure they weren't followed. Inside, the outpost was small but functional, with just enough space for 2 people. As Zila powered up the communications array, Ethan set up the equipment to begin uploading the encrypted data they had taken. "It's time," he said, turning to her. "Once we send this out, there's no turning back." "I know," Zila replied, a hint of sadness in her voice. "But it's the only way to ensure the technology isn't used for war." She started the transmission, sending the data to multiple independent news channels and scientific communities. As they watched the progress bar fill, an uneasy silence fell over them. The first wave of information would reach the public within hours. The ramifications would spread far and wide, and there was no telling how quickly Linhart or even her own people would respond. Ethan exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "We did it. But what happens now?" Zila turned to face him, her expression a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Now we prepare for the fallout. The Tirati will know I've broken the code. They'll come for me and you. The question is whether they'll treat us as criminals or something else." He reached out, taking her hand. "Whatever happens, I'm with you." Just as she began to respond, the communication array lit up with an incoming transmission, a high-priority signal from a Tirati command vessel. Zila's heart sank. She recognized the frequency. It was a direct line from her superior officer, Commander Velker. She accepted the transmission, and the holographic screen flickered to life, revealing Velker's stern visage. His crystalline eyes narrowed as he regarded her and Ethan. "Zelaya, you have violated our most sacred code," he said, his voice cold and authoritative. "You have exposed critical technology to a primitive species and jeopardized our mission." "It was the only way to protect Earth," Zila replied, her tone defiant. "There are those who would use this technology for conquest and destruction. I could not allow that." Velker's expression hardened. "Your actions have made you an outcast among your people. You know the penalty for breaking the code." Ethan stepped forward, speaking before Zila could respond. "If you want to punish someone, punish me. This was my idea as much as hers." Velker's gaze shifted to Ethan, and there was a moment of silence before he spoke. "Human, you do not understand the consequences of your interference. Zelaya's fate is not for you to decide." Zila took a breath, then squared her shoulders. "If you come for me, I will not resist. But if you harm him, I will make sure every secret the Tirati have ever kept is known to the entire galaxy." Velker's eyes flickered with something like surprise, and then with grudging respect. "You have chosen your path, Zelaya. Very well. You will be recalled for judgment." "And the human," he hesitated, and then added, "he is not our concern." The transmission cut off, leaving Zila and Ethan standing in stunned silence. The weight of what they had done, what they had unleashed, settled upon them. They had bought themselves a little time, but the true reckoning was still to come. Zila turned to Ethan, a look of resolve on her face. "We need to be ready. We've drawn a line in the sand. Now we have to fight for what we believe in." Ethan nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and exhilaration. They had defied the powers that sought to control them and expose the truth. Now, as fugitives on the run, their journey was far from over, but as long as they had each other, they would face whatever came next together. The safe house became a hive of preparation over the next few days, with the Tirati recalling Zila and Linhart's forces undoubtedly hunting for them. Ethan and Zila knew they couldn't stay hidden for long. The data they had leaked was already stirring up a global frenzy, with governments, scientists, and news outlets demanding answers. The truth was out there, but it was incomplete, and that meant both Earth and Zila's people were on a collision course, with consequences far greater than either of them anticipated. The message from Commander Velker had made it clear. Zila would be taken back for judgment, and the Tirati would not tolerate further disobedience. Ethan had no illusions about what that judgment would entail. The Tirati were a disciplined people, and they would see Zila's actions as a betrayal of the highest order. As they prepared their last-ditch plan, Zila turned to Ethan. "There's one more thing I haven't told you. she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "The technology we were working on, it's more than just a gravitational field. It's a portal generator." Ethan blinked, trying to process the implications. "A portal, as in, to another world?" Zila nodded. "Or even another dimension. It's still experimental, but it's powerful enough to move large masses across vast distances instantaneously. If we can activate it, we might be able to escape the Tirades' reach, or even take the fight directly to them." Ethan's pulse quickened. "So, we can create an escape route, or a weapon." "I was hoping to avoid the latter," she said softly, "but given the situation, we may not have a choice." Their plan was simple but risky. Reactivate the experimental portal generator at the research facility. Use it to create a rift large enough to escape, and if necessary, collapse the portal behind them to sever any connection the Tirade could use to follow. It was dangerous and untested, but it was the only option that could give them a fighting chance. With the hovercraft, they made their way back to the research facility, navigating through the forest under the cover of night. The facility was on high alert, with patrols and drones scouring the perimeter. Ethan and Zila approached carefully, using the cover of the trees to avoid detection. Zila's knowledge of the facility's layout gave them an edge, and soon they had bypassed the outer security and slipped into the underground lab where the portal generator was stored. The large, circular apparatus dominated the room, dormant, but humming with the latent energy of something that shouldn't exist in this world. Ethan set to work on the controls, while Zila initiated the power sequence. The machine rumbled to life, sending vibrations through the floor as its central ring began to spin, lights flickering in complex patterns along its surface. As the generator warmed up, the air within the ring shimmered, bending light and warping the space around it. "It's working," Zila said, her voice tinged with a mixture of hope and urgency. "We just need a few more minutes to stabilize the rift." But time was something they did not have. Alarms blared as a squad of security forces stormed into the lab, led by none other than Linhart himself. "Shut it down," he ordered, his voice echoing over the chaos. "You don't understand what you're doing." Ethan stepped in front of the controls, his jaw set. "We know exactly what we're doing," he shot back, "and we're not letting you take this technology for yourselves." Linhart's expression hardened. "You're tampering with forces beyond your comprehension. The Tirade aren't the only ones who will come for this technology. If you open that portal, you could be inviting dangers that make everything you're trying to prevent look insignificant." "We're willing to take that risk," Zila interjected, her voice steady. "The alternative is letting this technology become a weapon. We're giving Earth a chance to stand on its own." Linhart's forces moved in, weapons drawn, but before they could reach the generator, Zila activated a protective barrier, sealing off the control room. It wouldn't hold for long, but it would buy them the time they needed. As the portal stabilized, a swirling vortex appeared in the ring, an endless void of colors and darkness that seemed to stretch into infinity. Ethan glanced at Zila. "Are we sure about this?" "There's no other way," she replied, her eyes meeting his with a blend of fear and determination. "Once we're through, we collapse the portal. It's the only way to prevent anyone from following." Linhart's voice crackled over the comm system. "Don't do this, Zila. You know what's on the other side. You could be dooming us all." Ignoring him, Zila input the final sequence to initiate the portal. The rift flared to life, its edges pulsating as it opened wider, revealing a strange, otherworldly landscape beyond. But just as they were about to step through, the portal surged unpredictably, as if reacting to a foreign presence. The vortex twisted, and a shadowed figure appeared on the other side, an alien shape that seemed to shift and pulse with energy, its form unlike anything either of them had seen before. Zila's face paled. "Something's trying to come through. Can we shut it down?" Ethan asked, panic rising in his voice. "No," Zila replied, her hands flying over the controls. "Not without collapsing the entire generator. We'll have to risk it. Get ready." With no time to spare, Zila and Ethan jumped through the portal, just as the alien entity began to emerge. The sensation was like falling through a tunnel of light, with the world around them twisting and shifting in incomprehensible ways. For a brief moment, Ethan felt as though they were suspended between dimensions, caught in a liminal space where time and reality bled together. Then, with a violent jolt, they tumbled out onto solid ground. The air around them was thick and humid, and an alien sky stretched out above, swirling with colors Ethan couldn't name. They had made it through, but the portal remained active, still anchored to the facility. The shadowed entity was closing in, its form now clearer. A massive, shifting mass of dark tendrils and glowing eyes, reaching toward them with a hunger that chilled Ethan to the bone. "We need to collapse the portal now," Zila shouted. Ethan scrambled to access the generator's remote controls. "I'm trying," he said, frantically working to sever the connection. As the entity drew closer, Zila made a desperate decision. She reached into the generator's inner mechanisms and overloaded the power source manually. The portal shuddered and began to collapse, pulling the entity back into the rift. The last thing Ethan saw before the portal closed entirely was the entity's eyes, filled with a malevolent intelligence, as if it had seen them, recognized them, and would not forget. The portal snapped shut, and the oppressive energy dissipated, leaving Ethan and Zila alone on an alien world, surrounded by unfamiliar terrain. The silence that followed was absolute, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. Ethan turned to Zila, breathing hard. "Where are we?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we're alive, and as long as we're together, we have a chance." Ethan took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "We'll figure this out. We'll find a way back or make a life here, together." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a hope that had once seemed impossible. "Together," she echoed, leaning into him. As they set off into the alien landscape, one thing was clear. Their journey was far from over. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, but for the first time, they faced it not as an alien and a human, but as equals, partners, ready to embrace whatever came next. And so, hand in hand, they walked forward, ready to carve out a new destiny, one step at a time.